the recording. And just for the recording's sake, I want again to welcome Safia to our class and look forward to hearing about CLUBZERØ, her journey. And again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Raz. And just as a quick show of hands, we're all designers in the room by background, or are we from multidisciplinary sort of areas looking to get some information and insights into this space?
I think more multidisciplinary.
Excellent. Okay, great. Brilliant. So CLUBZERØ is from a vision perspective, we are looking to make the world move towards zero waste. Now, what that means is trying to transform the way that infrastructure is currently set up. Right now, we have linear models for consumption. So we consume a lot of packaging, we produce a lot of waste out of that. And CLUBZERØ's entire transformation of that is to move upstream towards reuse, so avoid the waste in the first place. And really, it was coined from an idea of how do we do that? What does that look like? And how do we make that come to life? Does it work as a business, et cetera, et cetera? So I'm on the other side of that, and I'm just going to walk you through some of the exciting design things that we worked through. So today we can call ourselves one of the leading reuse systems, transforming food and beverage operations through design-led innovation. That's a bit of a mouthful, but I'll explain. So to make a future for zero waste, to make reuse come to life and to make it scale requires considerable standardization. So if you think of the built environment, for example, when you are constructing or designing, let's say, a home, you have standardization everywhere. You have standardized windows, you have standardized doors, you have standardized taps, you have, standardized tile sizes. There's a lot of ways where we are actually approaching almost a checklist of smaller products that go into, let's say, a building and get assembled. Most of them are already standardized. Now, what we found was when we came to trying to build this big ambition on reuse infrastructure and supporting, let's say, food and beverage businesses first, how do we tackle that if we don't have standardization? And this image hopefully captures to some degree what sort of scale of operations we work to and how much diversity there is in the world of packaging. So coming from a very regulated and very standardized market, such as the built environment, of where design principles are very well established, to this was quite an eye-opening experience. So to replace the incumbent, we had to come up with something that would offer everybody to come together on. Now, what we initially found was that in an very sort of lightly regulated environment, such as packaging, where you really only have to comply to FDA if you're in the US or to EU standards if you're in the European Union, you can pretty much put anything out there. And no one's going to bat an eyelid about it. And that's when you look at the market, you see a lot of that. You see, in fact, it's incredibly price driven, which is how the market works, right? So it's going to look for what is the most cost effective way for me to sell something, and how do I buy that and earn a right over that, and achieve economies of scale. That's just how markets work. That's how every brand thinks. Don't let them tell you otherwise. And so when you're creating standards, you have to create a standardized packaging or a range of it, which would work for the most sort of, not for every small business, but certainly for your medium to large businesses, because that is your sort of fundamental size of the market that you're going to go for. And it doesn't matter what industry you land in. So for us, we knew that we needed to work out a solution that would operate across some of the biggest sort of stakeholders. And starting from the to-go space, our ambition and our journey started actually with beverages, standardizing packaging for the beverage industry. Then it moved into the food industry in 2021. So hence why on the left-hand side, you can see our multi-stakeholder engagement and trials that we ran in the US, in the UK, involved some of these big, brands. So you've got Coca-Cola, Starbucks, McDonald's. These are all major brands who purchase majority of the packaging that we see for the to-go space. So this is anything where you're buying something and you're leaving as opposed to sitting in or something that's refilled. So it had to work across all of those key players. There were some critical points. One is always branding, marketing. So if you think of packaging as a billboard, it starts to demystify itself. And that's a very heavily concentrated area where a brand wants to put its name. You don't have that on building materials. You don't have, you don't have a door that you buy that will say the door manufacturer all over it, and a window that you've bought the window manufacturer all over it. That's just not something that is expected. But in a packaging environment, it's prevalent. And so, how do you create space for that? Was something that we had to think about. And then critical pain points. Other than that, sort of system efficiency. If you are working with packaging which you're standardizing, is there a pooling system? So actually, is there a central company which they all purchase the packaging from, which kind of pools the packaging so that they can, sort of apply branding elsewhere, and there's a process for that. It makes it cheaper. So we had to think of those aspects. Now, from concept to commercialization is a long journey, and if I say our first prototypes, are, when I would say prototype, I would not even counting the 3D printed models that we first made. Right? So the journey, like with everybody in this room, is the same. So you're seeing polished, completed packaging types here on the right hand side. These are generation 4. So think of what Gen 1 looked like and think of the 3D printed versions before then, right? So I'm trying to ground all of this into a reality, and so you can sort of see some of that here on the table on the left hand side. If you really sort of squint, you can almost see some of our very early 3D printed models with a cheese board to try and keep people thinking away with us and consumers that we brought in as testing. So between the left and the right image is bang in the center. We had to explore a matrix of requirements, right? So like you build a brief for anything, this is a similar self-projected brief that you give yourself when you are coming up with something. You think, okay, here is the price target of my incumbent. How do I try and reach at parity or get close to a more sustainable version? And what are the various requirements of this performance-wise? So, how does it get stored? How does it get transported? How does it get washed, if that's the case, or serviced or repaired? And what are the needs of the material itself? So how are we going to pick our material? Is it plastic? Is it stainless steel? Is it aluminium? Is it have I missed anything? Is it some niche material that's unstable but could be interesting to test out? We've had a lot of people who've come to us in the past saying, I'm making a plastic alternative. Do you want to put this in your tool and run a few tests and tell us if it works? All of those things will come at you. So it's always interesting. It's a really nice exploration, but as nice as everything is, the fun, when you build that matrix going across and your requirements coming down, you'll notice which ones move you towards more price parity, and you just have to compromise and make your peace with where that's heading, where that's going. Standardization breakthrough here on the right. So we are on the other side of this journey, having now developed 12 standardized packaging lines for reuse at scale with the same efficiency and stackability as single use, but nowhere near the same volumes and stackability. So whilst, and this is partly because of the step change from single use to reuse. Wall thicknesses will always be thicker. There's more durability you are building into things, and you just can't compete with single use. So you could probably, get a stack of 50 in here of paper cups, for example, for beverage containers, but you could probably get about 12 for reusable. So you're not going to be price parity on a unit by unit basis, but when you run it through a per use system, if you buy in bulk, you can find economics that work somewhere further down. So some of you, and I hope most of you, get the opportunity to go the full arch in here. This was a really interesting exploration. I mean, through injection molding, you get to make molds, tools, and you get to see their full sort of production process. And it's a fascinating world. The packaging world is a fascinating world in terms of, as mentioned, there's very few guidelines as to what you can do. So the exploration here was interesting. We definitely found that the modeling technology is kind of similar. We used, sort of same 3D printing software platforms that you use elsewhere are also used for product and engineering testing and design. And then what we looked at was the material performance. Polypropylene, we picked a plastic which we felt was the strongest and had the most thermal stability. And then we just started testing this. So with different wall thicknesses, we went through a phase of wonky cups. And then that's fine. You're using that in a small cohort. There were our first customer that ever signed up had generation 1 of all our packaging. Everything was going wrong, to be very fair. And it's harder when it's a physical object that you're putting into someone's hands. It's even harder when that contains their morning coffee, right? So you get people in their best and their worst. They have very extreme opinions and ideas because it's something naturally that they're holding. So we found that, this is a more intimate use case. Hopefully you'll find less intimate use cases, which will be more forgiving. And thinking these things through is really critical from a thermal performance, because we were really concerned about liability as well. We obviously, you want to protect a consumer, you want to ensure you're not burning them or they won't harm themselves through using your product. And so you want to ensure you've gone through all the various rigorous steps to ensure, good closure systems, something that reassures them that, they've got a hot laksa and they're not going to drop it everywhere on their way home. So finding partners that want to test that has been really exciting. We've worked with Just Eat, for example, for food delivery, about 30 different restaurants. The smaller brands, much, much easier to approach for these sort of things and test in their space. They love it when you come along with some models and 3D printed things. You'll be amazed at how little people have an interaction with actual design on a day-to-day, right? It is remarkable to be part of a design process. People don't get to just wake up and be a part of a design process. So, putting yourself out there is one of the most wonderful things. You'll be amazed at the level of detail sometimes you'll get, whether unwarranted or not, but people will absolutely throw themselves out to work with you on it. That's definitely been one of my observations when testing with consumers. And so obviously when you're polishing and finishing things off and you're on the other side of having something that's scalable and you're confident that, okay, this is stable, this is using the right kind of material, this is getting to the economic sort of targets that you're expecting to see performance-wise. They've ticked all the boxes. They're not, falling apart anymore. You've got, at least over 10,000 or 20,000 units, depending on what your product type is. But you've got that in circulation. You've got the data to explain and you've verified your production supply chain, then you're ready to make this something that you can commercialize, right? So you get your ISO certification, you get inspection protocols of the product, but also in our context, we have QR code technology for traceability on each packaging. So we have an individual QR code serialized that is applied, which enables us to track that packaging. I don't think we're meant to say chip functionality. It's not chip in literal terms. It's more for traceability. So that, and also just before I move on to the next one is here we also ensured that we had vetted our supply chain setup. So making sure from a factory perspective everything is all clear. There's nothing that is untoward. Their labor systems are appropriate, and you don't have any funny things happening on the factory floor that would look bad for you. And this is primarily the sort of to ensure you have the certification so that when a customer does want to purchase, you have all of that lined up. So you have your safety records, you've done your testing, you've got all of that, however that applies to your product. So just make sure all of those certifications, those standards are met. You don't need to go full bells and whistles, just be very specific to the jurisdiction where you're selling, and just make sure you're adhering to the typical health and safety requirements and health and needs that your customers will come for. The technical spec is something that we put into our standard agreements with our manufacturers. So you will have a manufacturing agreement, and in that, don't be shy to put in that they need to test it, they need to ensure a certain amount of use out of it, and that they understand what parameters it needs to work in. Those are guarantees, those are warranties that you want to put into your agreement when you set that up. And then from a sort of a circular economy, we're all moving in this direction. I'm sure you've heard of DPP, so digital product passports. There is ambition from European Union through the PPWR, which is all moving towards serialization, digitization of products to ensure that there is some visibility on supply chain. So, where was this product made? How much material did it use? Where was it recycled successfully? This is now starting to happen more and more. I'd love to hear where the journey is at the moment for what you're seeing on the ground, but this is the general direction, which means that you'll want to start thinking of how to embed that into your own products as you go forward. And then, of course, in real time, that corresponds to data. So it tells you a lot about where that product has been, if there are status updates as it moves through the supply chain. So how do you visualize that through dashboards and other means as well? So we also have, of course, for our own KPIs, we like to measure our successes, and you'll have yours. It's always great to back that up. It's the first question we knew we were going to get when we were going out into the market was, how do you know it's better, and have you measured it? So this is a common thing that a customer will ask you, or anyone really who you approach, to say, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? So having that verified, whether it's through a life cycle assessment or some mechanism which is not you, is a third party saying, okay, we have looked at their full supply chain, and we've measured it end to end, and we understand that this is more sustainable. Here is the CO2, energy, waste, paper, plastic it's saving. You kind of make sure you've got that, and you try and calculate that so you know if it's 50% better or 73% better, whatever that metric is. You'll be able to promote what you're doing better. So our KPIs are measured around our return rates, and then we are, of course, measuring how much we are offsetting from a CO2 perspective. So we are 93% better than single use. We've done 2 rounds of LCAs. the way to see an LCA is not just to sort of see it as a final thing that you do at the end, but almost use it or assume that it's going to be a good way for you to improve on. So the first time we did our LCA, I think it was 66% better from a carbon reduction perspective. We then redid a lot of the aspects of our supply chain. We moved into generation 3 and 4 of our product, and we had control, I guess, to engineer and improve that. So your LCA shouldn't be something that you're like, oh my God, D-Day, I'm getting tested at, how good or bad are the full outcomes of all the decisions I've made, but hopefully it's going to be better, and you can keep using it as a way to improve the next time you do it. So we have here regulatory compliance. I know EPR is starting to bubble up in the US as well, extended producer responsibility. It is a regulatory framework which is putting ownership on producers. So if a producer makes anything and puts it on the market, they are responsible partly for the cost of managing that as a waste item. And this has been widely accepted. So there is no reason why anyone, producer or retailer, is now sort of in any position to challenge this. This is something that the sector and everybody has understood, that if you are, whatever it is, if it's textile, if it's plastics, whatever material type it is, you are also on the hook to pay a certain tax to the government to ensure that they can deal with that waste product. And so this is an interesting mechanism. One of the main reasons or drivers is economic savings, because what's currently happening is public sector funding is paying for all of your waste management, incineration, landfill costs. That is you, me, and everyone's taxes going into a central governmental pot, which then gets used for those various mechanisms. Now, what the government is saying is, if you put this product on the market, you pay a certain fee towards that, so that public spending can actually reduce and be spent elsewhere. Now, that's super important, because why are we here to support and improve industry's margins at our cost? That should be something that is their cost. And we're on the other side of that now. They have understood that, and that's why you are seeing EPR now in over 43 countries worldwide. So it is a very successful strategy, and it will help to drive more reuse targets and other aspects to make it harder and harder to produce, or keep producing single use, make it more expensive, essentially. And the last one is, of course, then we want to understand that, okay, well, why would you move towards reuse? What's the reason? For us specifically, we calculate it's an 85% saving. Now, there's a very good question that some of you have asked, and we can come into that in a second. 85 sounds attractive, and you're probably wondering, well, why isn't everyone already here? Well, if this is the case, it's a lot more complex than that, and it involves it's not just yes, it's a saving, but it requires a lot of organizational change to change a process. And it turns out that organizational change is one of the most expensive things that you can do, one of the hardest things you can do in an organization. So if you are used to selling, let's say, a single-use plastic item that's going one way, it's very, very hard for you to change your course. From a perspective of culture, you've got so much investment in teams that know how to do X, and now you're asking them to do Y. And you've got to move all of your incentives and all of the mindsets towards Y. So you either helicopter a team to execute Y and fire everybody else, or you slowly try and change X into Y. And that's a very painful, slow process. You might do both, but who knows? But the point is, it's organizational change, which includes a lot of people. So the reason why they're not able to race towards the 85% savings is just because of the status quo that they find themselves in. So we today just on our customer acquisitions, we've signed up some big players in the form of different cohorts. Some in we've done over 3 million packaging transactions, and some of these big brands were clusters together. So the QSR cluster, for example, was part of a next gen challenge in California. With closed loop partners. The retail was an activation here in London, and the others are actual sort of just directly working individually with these brands as part of our on-trade business to support them and scale them. So it's a mixed hybrid of partnerships that we've built through trials or through longer term contracts. And I think what this kind of map shows you, hopefully, and up to this date, is there is a percentage, or it's a very small percentage of customers that are willing to invest towards doing something that they think is more beneficial for the environment, but they're not 100% convinced on it being cheaper, but they are willing to invest and try. And this is outside an environment where there's regulatory compliance. So all of this is pre-regulatory compliance. This is a cohort of customers that want to do the right thing, and that might be less than 10% of the market, right? Whereas what you want to do is you want to build a business for the 90% of the market where everybody wants to buy you. Now, the reality is that in our environment, that is only happening because they are being forced to through regulatory, not because they want to. And that's really where the growth is. So I am under the firm belief that true scale for the circular economy is going to come through, the likes of these regulatory frameworks I've mentioned, EPR, DPP, PPWR, and the equivalent of what happens in the US is it's just a general direction to make it more and more expensive to continue in single use, where a producer is liable to pay higher and higher fees in taxes based on weight and volume. That's how EPR is calculated, until a framework such as a DRS scheme or others are brought into place, and then everybody can fit into that scheme and scope quite easily. So we've seen that culmination of, I guess, those sort of customers across the board. So we're of course HQ'd here in the UK, but we've been operating in the UAE. We've done our trials in the US, and we've been observing Singapore as it's launching its upcoming DRS. So the same sort of pathways that we see here in the UK are starting to emerge elsewhere. And we believe that's where you then have this tipping point. So you get to, reuse niche to reuse and refill or repair. There's everything that sits in that upstream part of the circular economy. We believe that that's going to largely be driven through a lot of this policy work that is coming, which then makes it more and more appetizing and easy for a consumer to feel like that's the mainstream thing. It's not a niche thing that I'm doing on my own. We are all expected to join up and do this because that is now what's required of us. And that is a shift in a consumer's mind from, oh, I'm just doing this little thing to try it out, to this is how things work and I have to participate. It's a different driver when you see that. And that brings us to the last slide. Many happy returns. Always helpful to come up with a nice, cute little catchphrase for yourself and the team. We have lots, and we keep banging them out, but we find them very interesting. It kind of, if others use it, even better. But it sort of says what it needs to say. So that's what I wanted to present to you all. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it was useful. I'm happy to take questions. I'm sure you have lots.
Thank you so much, Safia. This was great. Yeah, let's open it for everyone. And yeah, I think probably have either the questions that you thought about in advance or new questions? Yeah, who wants to start? Anyway,
So maybe just kind of take a bit of a deeper dive into the 85% that you talked about. I mean, sure, there's regulatory pressure, but as you mentioned yourself in the beginning, the majority is financially
Yeah.
led. Even, or could you expand a bit more on how you argue that number, or why people are? I'm sure it's a lot of internal discussions, but if that number, if that you would present that to a CEO, he would try to move everything in the company to get to that number.
Yes, so it's 85% on their packaging only. So it's not for the entire business. But there is, you know, there is a consensus that this is more commercially viable if multiple players are involved, right? So it is not for one retailer or producer to pursue on their own. It is not commercially viable, but it is if there's enough volume throughput to share. And then they can start to see, A, that it is de-risked. So it isn't just their neck on the line. That it is also something that's harmonized for a consumer, because while you can, we've seen this ourselves, while we can show the saving on packaging, the cost to onboard is actually really high if you are an individual customer, right? So if you are a, let's say, Starbucks, and you want to move everyone to reusable cups, which is what they have been trying to do for years. Their ambitions, and there's a lovely CSO called Michael Kabori who was leading Starbucks. And this is a, by 25, we've passed 25, they had plans to have reuse at real immense scale across the US. And they have struggled to do that because they cannot do that on their own. The amount of onboarding they need, this is irrespective of the fact they have such a successful app. They have so many people who use their own app, their point system, et cetera, et cetera. It just tells you that they have to leverage network effects. They have to have multitude of retailers, producers. It's a systemic thing. It's infrastructure, right? It's not one entity. And so that 85% crumbles away in the face of having to go at it alone. And if you start to put the cost increase for onboarding on the marketing comm side, and which doesn't bring in necessarily more sales, it just changes behavior towards something that's more sustainable. You're just like, well, if I put every pound and I don't get my pound minimum or dollar or a multiple of that, I've kind of like wasted my marketing budget. So from that angle, the most important thing is to build consortiums. Really, that's the way forward. You'll have multitude of producers, and sort of standardization also started, I think, with that in mind. Lots of window producers, lots of door manufacturers, or whatever, coming together saying, it would be better if we all made things to roughly the same dimensions. And somewhere along the line, people thought that was a good idea, and then they built the standards off the top of that. So there it works when collaboration comes together, and I think that's happening a lot. It is definitely. We have roundtables which convene lots of retailers and producers, and then they get comfortable with this concept. So it is 100% feasible. It isn't fast.
Thank you.
I have a question in the meantime. We talked a lot about the producer, the retailer case, but what about the customer case? I mean, can you talk about how the experience looks like from the customer perspective, and how do you make it desirable for the customer, not just for the retailer? Because in a way, right, you're creating, you need to have two sides on board.
Yeah. Customer journey has to be no different, and you have to create absolutely no friction for the customer. Otherwise, the retailer and producer will not be involved. That's fundamental. They are the first ones to ask, what does a customer journey look like? And if it's do this, go down that road, turn left, go up the stairs into a dark alley and pray, they're out, right? So you have to create zero friction point. So we are at the moment building out a customer journey flow exactly for one of these reasons for an upcoming roundtable that we have, because we know that's the first question that will get asked and by that I'll give you examples. So when we launched our Just Eat offering, we asked consumers, we did a lot of human-centered design, which I'm sure you've all come across and you follow some of those principles. We started in the methodology for the IDEO's methodology, design methodology from the beginning. So we kind of, since 2015, very much on that mindset. So we interviewed a whole bunch of people and we asked them, okay, if when we launch this offering on Just Eat and you can order your food and have it delivered in reusable packaging, how would you like to return that? Almost nobody said we will take it back to store, right? So everybody said, and nobody was even prepared to walk down the road to the nearest corner shop or 7-Eleven or some convenience store. No, they said we want it collected from our doorstep for free, of course. So this is the extreme you're working with. Okay, so it's got to be free. You got to collect it from you. And so it was a trial. It didn't make a difference to us to necessarily make any money out of it. What we wanted to show is what do we need to design to make this work for each stakeholder, and then take that away and work on that further. So when we had a budget, we knew that, of course, we couldn't offer it for free. We had to charge a nominal fee. We figured out what that nominal fee was. We did curbside collections. So we designed a bag. Consumers could place all their packaging into this collection bag, and we did curbside collections. We didn't do it every day, but we amassed that packaging over a period of time and then collected it. So then you could see, oh, okay, so there is and that I make that sound very easy, but what we built for that was a returnable yellow bag, which was zipped entirely, so it was sealed. It didn't create any odors. It was made from recycled polypropylene. It was woven and branded, and it had instructions on the bag so that if you forgot, you knew exactly what to do. It had a QR code. You could scan it. It takes you straight to, God forbid, an app. Unfortunately, we had to develop a way to register the customer's return, and they returned that, scanned that, and sent that back. So there was friction in the sense that you had to download and you had to scan when you were returning this from your home. So that was probably the only aspect which was challenging in terms of friction for the consumer. We would have liked a less friction-led process. And I think because it was a trial and people were sort of okay with just doing it for a while, it worked. But I think, that would be a very big undertaking for everyone to have to scan all their packaging, download an app, scan all their packaging and return. The upcoming Welsh requirements for which we're working on, so Wales, one of the nations in the UK, has instigated a requirement for curbside collection. They're one of the first of its kind. And because we've done it, we've done it in the trials, we kind of know already what a consumer is going to want to see and not want to see. And so we're coming at the table already with some experience in terms of what we think is scalable and not. And we will, we've already built that app once upon a time. So we know we have that source code, we can reuse some of that, we can chop and change and test it ahead of time for a bigger geography. So it's never gone to waste, but yeah, you've got to follow the process, get the data, get the insights, and then see if you can reiterate and improve on that customer journey.
Thank you. More questions? Rita.
You spoke a little bit about how a lot of this works only if there are multiple parties that adopt this, and that's when value gets created. So could you speak a little bit more about cracking that first sort of partnership and convincing them to come on board, and how that led to the customers that you now have on board? Like, what does that journey look like when you have to convince a lot?
Might need to repeat that. You're a little further away from, so something
Yeah.
about partners, other.
The question was, you were talking about the need to have like a multi-stakeholders, approach with many stakeholders on board. So if I get the question, how do you get to convince all the stakeholders to, to be part of this new system that is created?
So the system, sorry.
Oh, and where do you start? What's the starting point for that particular effort?
Okay, so I think I'll give you the way that we have led this. So we have had visibility, for example, that governments are looking to initiate reuse into their deposit return scheme, right? We had this visibility last year. And as an entity that has done a lot of trials and pilots, so we've done a bit of curbside, we've done retail, we've done a lot of on-trade, hospitality, we've built that entire infrastructure for tracing, etc. We saw this opportunity and we could see it coming, and we had exactly this dilemma, like, how do we grab this? How do we put ourselves in this, and how do we get everybody around us to want to do this with us? So, this is a classic B2B sales question. It's a very good one. I will say that, stalking and emailing 50,000 people is definitely not the right approach online. Okay, so don't, press yes to the email you get from someone saying, I can get you, 500,000 names of people in your industry, pay me $100. That's definitely not the right approach, okay? So the first and foremost aspect is, if you are the expert in the room, you just have to lead. Leadership is about leading, and sometimes that can look as though you are what Gen Zers have taken on board as manifesting. So you see yourself in a role which is not hallucinating. There's a difference between hallucination and manifestation. So manifestation should be predicated and built on your core skill set, and it enhances and takes you into the future. So you are basing it on real, I am an architect, I am a designer, I am an expert in this subject matter. And so I think I'm the right person for this X, Y, and Z that's coming along, more so than anybody else. And so I can 100% lead, and probably, in fact, 100% provide the best evidence in here. And so the moment you start framing it that way, you find that is the step one. You have to get yourself ready into where you want to go to. And once you are there, okay, great, this is me, this is what we're doing. It takes a bit of maturity, because what you also realize is, when you get to a certain age and you look around, you think that everybody is phenomenal. Actually, when you get into the workplace, you realize actually there's very small number of people who are inspirational. You've probably heard Barack Obama say this about political leaders as well. The same rules apply in any room you go into. There is a number of people who are really, really great, and then you have everybody else. And so you are going to be valuable if you're already that small amount of number and you can lead. So lead and position yourself. So what we did was we kind of brought our team together and we said, we're going to produce a really high value report. It's going to show the economic benefits of what we do. and we're going to give it to everybody for free, and we're going to bring everybody together in a roundtable. And we're going to announce the launch, first the development of this report. So we're going to convene everybody first online in a webinar type format, and then we'll bring everybody together in person so they see each other, etc. And it's a non-competitive environment. They will feel as though they have provided some data insights in the webinar because you've asked them for certain points. You then create and finalize what you're producing as a product, and you give them that product for free. It doesn't have to be a report. It could be whatever it is that you're doing, right? They are part of the process and journey, and human-centered design will teach you this anyway. It's actually, you're not necessarily giving them what they've asked for, because they don't necessarily always know what they actually need. They will give you something that they think they need, but that might not be what they need. And so, but you make them feel like they're part of that process. And so they're kind of tied in some ways, emotionally. And so when you invite them to a round table, you'll find everybody wants to come because everyone likes a free sandwich and a free coffee and to sit for some time and tell others that they've been at a round table, right? Like they've sat opposite their other peers at other brands, and they've met everybody, and you create this FOMO in a room. It's a fantastic environment to then present your product, whatever that is. In this case, it was a high value report showing the economic benefits, and start to signal to everybody in the room that you are truly leading this. And this has to happen over and over. It's not a one-off thing. You have to then, take them on a journey, build them towards other things. So this is just one example. There's lots of other ways that you'll find works. Mass randomized emails that convert, no, not really. Same for mass LinkedIn approaches, no, not really. I think certain industries in B2B sales, it is through word of mouth. It is building your brand and building your personal brand and building your offering brand. That to be trustworthy, reliable, and highly valuable to them.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Steph.
Closer to just yell it out.
Yell it out, and if necessary, I'll.
Raz can repeat.
Yes.
So a lot of the things that are mentioned are like the economics of the system. So I'm kind of curious, like when you started this project, how did you thought about making the economics make sense for people? And then throughout a lot of the learnings that you've had, where did they land? Now, how do you see them?
Okay, so yeah. 8 years of work where we have scaled and gotten to profitability in the on-trade sector, having built our own platform for traceability, built our own standardized packaging with QR code traceability, infrastructure systems, then having built triangulated those three things, worked with operators to collect, deliver, worked with wash partners to service and decommission. That entire system we built, and really built it for our own purposes, so that when governments came to us last summer, so Welsh government said, can you provide evidence to a room full of 100 people to explain how this works? And we need you to, this evidence is critical because it's part of our consultation. Tell them what you've done, how you've done it, what it's looked like. That was a piece of cake because we had done it for ourselves. We knew that if we flipped it the other way, we could do this for anybody else because we have figured it all out. And now we know that a lot of those processes that we have learned to do are also helpful to a different producer who is now having to move into reuse, right? So they have to figure out how to develop reusable packaging. The compliance requirements is that it has to be traceable. And so, questions that we're asking is, do you have a supplier for that? Have you figured that out? Do you know where they are? And can they help you with the traceability? And if not, that's great because we can give them some guidance. We won't do it for them, but we can consult for them, and we can charge a fee for that because we've done it. We've done it ourselves. So you build that, there's a word for it, you build that muscle memory that you've applied for your own business and then you just productize it essentially. That's what you do. So it's pure, it's like consultancy in some ways, but because we've actually done it, we haven't just told somebody they should do it. We've got a lot more of an insight into how that can work. So that's one aspect. And then we can find ourselves very comfortably pitching for government contracts because we have done it to a certain proven scale ourselves.
Thank you.
I was wondering, like, in all the countries that you operate, is there like any, like, do you find any customer habits or like any difference in customer habits or like company's culture? Maybe is there like any policy environment have a role in that?
So I'll follow on Ignacio's question. So the question is in countries other than the UK, if I understand correctly, I mean, how do you operate in an environment that is different in terms of culture, policies, and so forth? I mean, what sort of adjustments do you need to make?
Okay, so anything that you are localization. So localization is super important for adoption. It doesn't matter what you're selling. Physical product, digital product, you have to localize it. So from a practical standpoint, where we have, I'll give you an example again. When before we produced the high value report in the UK for convening everybody, we had produced a high value report for Singapore. And we had worked with the Singapore's government, the National Environmental Agency, the NEA, which is a government's arm that deals with all things related to environment, which has a subdivision on waste. And we produced a report which they fully read. Now, my experience in Singapore is that they are much smaller, the city and country kind of combined. And people actually do work there in government, right? So you produce something and you give it to somebody in government, you are working with very high caliber people, first of all. So that's the first thing we understood as we were engaging with Singaporean government and then industry and then consumers, all very different to UK government, UK industry, and UK consumers. So there, the government stakeholder, very smart, very switched on, almost, kind of assuming, they read through our report. There were a few things that they corrected for us and handed it back. I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting someone to peer read my report. That's amazing. That's never happened in the grand scheme of things. This is with their regulators. And so then on the industry side, we found them much more difficult to get hold of because of the cultural difference. And we're not Singaporean, none of us are locals, and they imagine they have a lot of people pitching that come and arrive and want to do huge and wonderful things. So they're a little bit more reserved, and the process within which you can actually get to a conversation again is very different. And we're new in the market, which is why we created this webinar that then led to the roundtable in person, was because this is the best way to break the ice, right? You go into a new environment, they don't know you, you haven't even built your brand there, nobody knows your company there. So you have to really build goodwill, you have to build a relationship map, get some other stakeholders, NGOs, other types of organizations that will be very aligned with your mission and invite them along as well as the target industry brands, retailers, producers that you want there. So we approached it that way. And then the last bit this applies to a consumer, but also to industry. Asians are very price sensitive. as an Asian myself, happy to say that they're very, very conscious in terms of what they spend. They want to make sure that it's the most affordable, cheapest thing that's out there. This is just who you're working with. So commercial aspects are going to be even more critical than anything else, right? Unfortunately, the sustainability nice thing is, if it's cheap enough, do it. So your value proposition is different. Your consumer is also the industry player equivalent has the same mindset. So you are in a much more price sensitive environment. Before we even put a foot in Singapore, we did a lot of pre-entry work, market pre-entry research to understand, is there a big enough market? If not, is it good to land and expand through Singapore? We have a patent there. It gives us some. So, before you even try and localize, just first see if it's the right market conditions for you. Is it big enough? Is it sustainable enough? Is it going to help? Are you pushing a boulder up a mountain, or do you find actually it's going to be much more straightforward? Are there the right partners on the ground that will help carry out or support your business there in whatever way or shape or form? So yeah, localization is really critical. So that comes later. So anything that we replicate, that we build here, when we were to replicate that overseas, we have to change language term, automate language in all of the technology interfaces to be compliant with whatever domain that is. And quite often, even in Singapore, there's Chinese, there's Malay, and there is Tamil, I think. There's always a handful of languages. In Wales, it's English and Welsh, for example, that we have to provide. So you have to think of the different consumers that will interact with your product at the end of the day as well. So localization is really important. It's a bit easier in markets such as US because you've got same language, and you probably would put Spanish in there. And you might have, it's a single market, sort of. And in some geographies, you might have an overlay. But when we move from there to UAE, to UK, to US, there's quite a lot going on.
Thank you. We may have time for one question. Yes, John.
I have more branding/marketing related question. A lot of, especially with cafes, holding a cup in your hand and having the brand's name plastered all over the cup is very much a part of that cafe experience. By just browsing online, I just saw that CLUBZERØ had their branding as well on the cups you guys offer. A couple of questions regarding it. One being, was there ever been a friction point while addressing retailers with just this branding? Because for cafes, it's just been such a big part of their marketing, having that cup experience, especially for clients like Starbucks. It's their whole USP. I mean, not whole, but like a huge chunk of their USP is having a Starbucks cup in your hand. Has there ever been a friction point? Do you have like a co-branded collaboration branding system?
Yeah, so I can answer that question. It's very easy. In an on-trade hospitality sector, no one cares. It's closed. It's either a major event space, or it's a major office or university campus, or the brands just are happy to default to a standardized packaging type, and nobody has raised an eyebrow. They can sometimes use washable markers and other ways of applying, like a person's name or something more operationally required, like that's required, and that's not a problem. So that approach works because it's standard, free issue with our brand, and it's pooled, so it's cheap for everybody. There's no issue with that. Scaling that in a retail environment, not feasible. So every producer wants to own their own packaging, and will own their own packaging, will own their own reusable branded asset. And what we just do is make sure that the system enables third-party packaging to exist in it. That's the only difference. So we don't try and mandate or force brands to necessarily use ours in a retail environment, but in closed environments like on trade, that has worked without any pushback per se.
Thank you. So, final question. This is quite a journey, still going on, and I'm wondering what advice you would have for the students who may, very soon find themselves in maybe a very similar journey.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think I would never have guessed that I would be, it's 10 years from my light bulb moment. So when I came up with CLUBZERØ and I sketched the very first sketch on a train, that light bulb moment was in 2015. So it's 2016 and I'm still, I'm on the other side building the business. And we're scaling it. I would say I don't believe there's such a thing as an overnight success. I think with the design principles that you will all have at the end of this, and you'll understand, taking that into a environment where you can very clearly see a problem that you're solving for, and you can see that this is a problem which is not going away, and it is a problem that's only going to get bigger and bigger, then you're moving in the general direction, in the correct general direction, right? So where you decide to place your emphasis, do that very wisely and make sure that you researched it, right? So the problem of waste was never going to go away. We are, only increasing in population and in consumption, so it's only going to get worse and bigger, and the stakes are going to get higher, and it's going to become more and more expensive as waste and fuel energy prices keeps going up. We can't keep burning, landfilling, the waste management costs, all of that becomes harder and harder to sustain. So pick a problem where it's not going to suddenly change overnight, because you are not going to have an overnight success, certainly. So that. One of the reasons why I think we have flourished, whereas others who have come and gone have not, I guess this is always to do with the details. So where you decide to pay emphasis on how you spend is going to determine how well you do long term. So on the journey of innovation, when you build something that is solving a problem, and you get some folks to excited about the opportunity, you can make the economics stand up. You've done an MVP of some sort. It hasn't fallen. It can be as scrappy as hell, but you've got good data out of that. You convince some people to put some money behind your business for shares, equity, and you bring them on board and you have a pot. How you spend that is going to be really critical. So I think the learnings that we've always done is we've never invested in something where we are preempting a scenario in some ways. So we never built our own infrastructure with the hope that we would get to capacity, because that's something that's out of your hands. So try and not invest in heavy things that will come back as recurring costs, whether you are successful or not. So try and not get sucked into a shiny work office that you want to put everyone in this beautiful studio that, has all the bells and whistles before you've gotten to a certain scale, for example, right? So there's lots of these things that are budget related. If you spend wisely, you'll find yourself on the other side. Because you don't know if it's going to be more, I'll tell you, it's going to be more expensive than you thought. It's going to take more time than you thought. So the fundamental is be in cockroach mode forever. Get into that habit, get used to that. Because when you do raise funding, that's great. But when you go back to raise more funding in your next, the second, third tranche, whatever it is, you've got to show how well you've used that capital and what it's managed to get you to. So definitely that. Some other parting words of wisdom. Don't hire big names from big companies because the likelihood is that they've burnt themselves and they are not going to burn themselves a second time for you. So we've all made this mistake. Lots of founders make this mistake. They hire, ex Uber, ex Facebook, X whatever, and it looks fantastic on the CV and they sound unbelievable, but they just don't bring the same kind of energy and determination because they've spent it in the previous company where they were. So hire for people who are really passionate, really driven, and want to see it succeed, and give them, a share option scheme, build that in. So you incentivize them towards a future where you will hopefully get to an exit and everyone will do well out of that. So mission is really key. And loyalty is really key. So people who you bring onto your team who are good people, they believe in you, they will do the right thing. I know these are really basic things, but there's a difference between someone who's very mission led and a difference between someone who's very mercenary. They just want to get paid, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's really hard to build a startup which is doing this when someone just wants this. Okay, so you just have to find someone who's comfortable with being uncomfortable and can ride those waves with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Safia. This has been incredible.
No, good. I'm so pleased.
And yeah, a lot of food for thought. Thank you so much again. And
yeah, no, thank you. Good luck with everything. And yeah, hope it all works, in the right direction, and stay resilient and stay excited and curious.
Thank you. Thank you. We're just, 2 steps from fixing the world, but working on it.
Amazing.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Raz. See you.
Bye-bye. Bye, Shruti. Okay, let's take a break. It's 1:28. Let's be back at 1:38. And I'll end this.